Hello, story lovers, and welcome back to our channel. We are drawn to tales of passion, secrets, and the intricate webs people weave, only to find themselves ensnared. The story you are about to hear is one such tale, a journey into a world of gilded cages and forbidden desires, where the price of a single transgression can be a fate worse than death. Before we delve into the shadows of opulence and deceit, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, so you never miss our explorations into the human heart's darkest corners. Now, let us enter the world of Eleanora Sterling, a woman who had everything, and therefore had everything to lose. Eleanora Sterling existed in a world painted in hues of champagne gold and diamond dust silver. Her life was a masterpiece of curated perfection, each day a meticulously arranged still life. The Sterling Mansion, a neoclassical monolith overlooking the city, was less a home and more a museum dedicated to the family's immense wealth. Its marble floors were so polished they reflected the ghost of anyone who walked upon them, its vast rooms filled with art that was famous, expensive, and utterly devoid of the messy, chaotic pulse of genuine passion. It was, in every sense, Eleanora's cage, and its bars were spun from 24-karat gold. Her husband, Marcus Sterling, was the architect of this cage. A man forged in the crucible of corporate takeovers and boardroom battles. His affection was measured in stock prices and acquisitions. Their marriage, now in its 20th year, had long ceased to be a partnership of hearts and had transitioned into a merger of dynasties. He provided her with a life of unimaginable luxury. She provided him with an heir, a flawlessly elegant hostess, and a beautiful, placid accessory to his power. It was a bargain struck in their youth, and Eleanora, for years, had dutifully played her part. But a quiet desperation had begun to fester within her, as insidious as the rust that dared not tarnish the sterling silver. At 47, she was a portrait of grace and composure, her beauty maintained with the rigorous discipline of a professional athlete. Yet, when she looked in the mirror, past the designer gowns and the cold glitter of inherited jewels, she saw a stranger with haunted eyes. She saw a woman starving in the midst of a feast. Her days were a predictable cycle of charity luncheons where women with identical smiles discussed inconsequential matters, fittings with couturiers who treated her body like a mannequin, and silent dinners with a husband who was more intimate with his tablet than with her. The art world was her only sanctioned escape. It was a respectable hobby for a woman of her station. She sat on the boards of 3 major museums, her name a gilded plaque on the patron's wall. She attended gallery openings with the same detached air she attended everything else, nodding politely at abstract canvases and bronze sculptures. The art, like everything else in her life, was a status symbol, an asset. It was meant to be owned, not felt. That was until the night she met Leo Vance. The gallery was a stark white cube in the city's trendiest district, a deliberate contrast to the hallowed, hushed halls of the institutions Eleanora usually frequented. It buzzed with an energy that was young, raw, and a little dangerous. The event was a showcase for emerging artists, and Eleanora had only attended as a favor to a fellow board member. She moved through the crowd with her customary poise, a serene island in a sea of black turtlenecks and avant-garde hairstyles. She was bored, and then she saw it. Tucked away in a small alcove was a painting that stopped her cold. It was a chaotic explosion of color and emotion, a canvas that seemed to throb with a life force of its own. It depicted a city street in the rain, but it was more than that. The artist had captured the loneliness of the crowd, the frantic energy of survival, the way the neon lights bled into the wet asphalt like liquid dreams. It was raw, imperfect, and breathtakingly alive. For the first time in decades, a piece of art made Eleanora feel something. It was a jolt, a shock to a system that had been dormant for years. She sought out the name on the small card next to the piece. Leo Vance. He has a fire in him, that one. The gallery owner, a shrewd woman named Isabella Rossi, whom Eleanora knew casually, materialized at her side. A bit untamed, but the talent is undeniable. Eleanora couldn't tear her eyes from the canvas. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice a low murmur. Isabella gestured with a crimson-nailed finger towards a corner of the room. He was exactly as his art had promised. Untamed. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with a cascade of dark, unruly hair that fell into his eyes. He wore a paint-splattered jacket over a threadbare t-shirt, a stark contrast to the tailored suits and designer dresses surrounding him. He wasn't talking to the wealthy collectors or the fawning critics. Instead, he was locked in an animated conversation with a bartender, laughing with an uninhibited joy that felt utterly foreign in Eleonora's world. His eyes, when they briefly swept the room, were a startlingly intense shade of green, burning with an artist's fervor. Summoning a resolve she didn't know she possessed, Eleonora crossed the room. As she approached, he turned, and those green eyes landed on her. For a moment, the noise of the gallery faded away. It was as if a spotlight had found them, isolating them in an intimate space. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Eleonora Sterling. Your painting. It's magnificent." He looked at her, truly looked at her, in a way no one had in years. He wasn't seeing the Sterling name, the couture dress, or the diamond earrings. He was seeing her. A small, wry smile played on his lips. "It's not for sale," he said, his voice a low baritone with a rough edge. Eleonora blinked, taken aback. "I beg your pardon? The piece you were looking at, Asphalt Heartbeat, is not for sale. It's the first one I painted when I moved to this city. Mine." His defiance was as shocking as it was intriguing. No one said no to Eleonora Sterling, but instead of feeling insulted, she felt a flicker of something else. Respect. He valued his art more than the money it could bring. "I see," she said. "Well, it's a powerful piece. It speaks." "What did it say to you?" he asked, his gaze direct, challenging. The question was deeply personal, cutting through the usual pleasantries. She found herself answering honestly. "It said that even in a crowd, one can be utterly alone, and that there's a fierce beauty in the struggle." His smile widened, reaching his eyes this time. It transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. "You get it," he said with a note of wonder. "You actually get it." That was the beginning. It started innocently enough. Eleonora, under the guise of being a patron, commissioned a piece from him. Her official reason was to foster new talent. Her true reason was to have an excuse to see him again. His studio was another world. It was a converted warehouse loft in a part of town her driver was hesitant to even enter. The space was vast, chaotic, and smelled intoxicatingly of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases in various states of completion were everywhere, leaning against walls, stacked in corners. It was a mess, but it was a vibrant, living mess. It was the complete antithesis of her sterile mansion. Here, away from the prying eyes of her world, she felt herself exhale for the first time in years. With Leo, she wasn't Mrs. Sterling, the society icon. She was just Eleonora. He treated her not with the deference she was accustomed to, but with a teasing familiarity that was both thrilling and terrifying. He'd get paint on her cheek and laugh as he wiped it away with a rough thumb. He'd ask her questions no one else dared to ask: if she was happy, what she dreamed of, who she was before she became a Sterling. Their conversations were a dance of intimacy. She, in turn, was fascinated by him. He spoke of art not as an investment, but as a religion. He talked about light and shadow, about capturing a fleeting emotion on canvas. He was passionate, idealistic, and possessed a hunger for life that she had long forgotten. He was everything her world was not. The physical line was crossed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She had gone to the studio to see the progress on her commissioned piece. A storm had broken over the city, the sound of rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the warehouse roof. They were standing close, looking at the canvas, a swirling abstract of deep blues and tumultuous grays that mirrored the storm outside. "It's about being trapped," he said softly, his eyes on the painting. "About wanting to break free but not knowing how." His gaze shifted from the canvas to her face. The air grew thick, charged with an unspoken energy that had been building for weeks. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was electric, a spark on her parched skin. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt more intimate than any embrace she had shared with her husband. All the rules, all the propriety, all the years of disciplined control simply evaporated. She didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. When he kissed her, it was not the gentle, passionless peck she was used to. It was a kiss of desperate longing, of a hunger that matched her own. It was a storm breaking within the four walls of the studio, a chaotic, beautiful, and utterly ruinous cataclysm. The affair was a fire, and Eleonora, who had lived her life in a climate-controlled environment, threw herself into the flames. They met in secret, their stolen hours in his studio becoming the only real moments in her life. She would leave her world of silent meals and polite conversation and enter his, a world of loud music, cheap wine, and the smell of paint. She felt reckless, she felt young, she felt alive. She began to support him not just with commissions, but with a steady, secret flow of money. She used a pseudonym and a discreet art buyer to purchase his works at inflated prices, creating a buzz around his name. She introduced his portfolio to influential gallery owners, whispering his name in the right ears at the right cocktail parties. She told herself she was being a patron, a mentor. She refused to acknowledge the truth. She was buying his time, his affection, his presence in her life. The danger was a constant, thrilling hum beneath the surface of their affair. There were close calls. A canceled luncheon meant she arrived at the studio unexpectedly, nearly crossing paths with one of Leo's friends. Her driver once made a casual comment about how often her gallery visits took her to the industrial district. Marcus, ever observant, began to notice a change in her. "You seem distracted lately, Eleonora," he commented one evening, not looking up from a financial report. His voice was flat, but his words were a cold stone dropped into the placid pool of their dinner. "I've just been very involved with the museum's new acquisition fund," she lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. "It's invigorating." "Is it?" he said, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before they returned to the screen. "See that it doesn't tire you out." It wasn't a statement of concern. It was a warning. The more alive she felt with Leo, the more she noticed the deadness of her real life. His studio was filled with vibrant color, while her home was a symphony of beige and gray. His touch was warm and sure, while her husband's was a phantom limb, a presence she no longer felt. But the lines began to blur. Leo, once fiercely independent, grew accustomed to the lifestyle her money afforded him. He upgraded his art supplies, moved to a better studio still in the same area, but less drafty, more respectable. He started dressing better. The financial dependence began to weave itself into the fabric of their relationship, a thread of gold that was both beautiful and strong enough to bind. One evening, lying tangled in the sheets of his bed, the city lights twinkling below, he turned to her. "Leave him," he whispered, his voice serious. "Come with me. We could go to Paris or Florence. I could paint and you could just be you." His words were a sweet poison. The fantasy was intoxicating. A life of passion, of art, of freedom. But the reality was a cold slap. Leave Marcus? It was unthinkable. It wasn't just leaving a man. It was leaving an empire. Her life, her identity, her son's inheritance, it was all tied to the sterling name. Marcus would not let her go quietly. He would crush her, and he would obliterate the young, idealistic artist who had dared to trespass on his property. "I can't," she whispered back, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes, quickly masked by a forced nonchalance. "Right," he said, turning away from her. The gilded cage. He didn't bring it up again, but a subtle shift had occurred. A new tension entered their secret world. The fire of their passion was still there, but now it was shadowed by the weight of what could never be. Eleonora felt herself being pulled in two directions, her heart caught between the vibrant chaos of Leo's world and the cold, glittering security of her own. She was playing a dangerous game, juggling a secret that could incinerate everything she touched. And as she lay awake that night, long after she had returned to her silent mansion and the empty space in her marital bed, she had the terrifying premonition that the flames were already beginning to spread. The affair, which had begun as a secret garden for Eleonora, a vibrant sanctuary from her sterile life, slowly began to feel like a different kind of trap. The initial euphoria, the thrill of rebellion, started to curdle into a constant, low-grade anxiety. The stolen hours in Leo's studio, once a liberation, were now fraught with a tension that had little to do with the fear of being discovered. It was a tension that grew between them, as fine and strong as a spider's silk, threatening to ensnare them both. The change in Leo was subtle at first. The money Eleonora funneled into his career, intended as a gesture of support from an anonymous patron, had worked. His name was now whispered in the elite art circles she inhabited. He had a solo exhibition scheduled at a prestigious gallery, the very same one where they had met. He had moved into a new studio, a space that was cleaner, brighter, and significantly more expensive. The starving artist, whose raw hunger she had found so intoxicating, was now well-fed. And with that, his hunger had changed. It was no longer just a hunger for creation, but a hunger for the world she represented. He began to resent the secrecy. "Why must we always hide in this studio?" he'd ask, gesturing around the now stylish loft. "I want to take you to dinner, a real restaurant, not some takeout place where we have to listen for footsteps on the stairs." "Leo, you know we can't," Eleonora would say, her voice tight. "My husband, my world, it doesn't allow for this." "Your world," he'd scoff, a bitter edge to his voice she'd never heard before. "The world that's buying my paintings. The world I'm good enough to sell to, but not good enough to be seen in." His words stung because they held a kernel of truth. She was using him just as he was, in a way, using her. Their relationship was a transaction cloaked in the language of passion. She was buying his youth, his vitality, his rebellion. He was enjoying her wealth, her influence, her access. The beautiful, chaotic art they were creating together was being built on a foundation of deceit, and the cracks were beginning to show. He grew careless. He started calling her at odd hours, his voice thick with wine, forgetting the delicate schedule she had to keep. Once, he sent a bouquet of wild, passionate red roses to the mansion, the kind of flowers Marcus would never buy. The card simply read, "For my muse, L." Eleonora intercepted it just in time, her heart pounding in her chest as she told the housekeeper they were a misguided delivery from a floral service. She spent the rest of an agonizing day shredding the card and disposing of the flowers one by one in a public trash can miles from her home, feeling like a common criminal. The scent of the roses seemed to cling to her, a perfume of guilt and panic. Meanwhile, the bars of her gilded cage were tightening. Marcus, who had for years treated her with a benign neglect, began to watch her. His observations were never direct, but they were sharp and unnerving. He would pick up her phone and idly scroll through it, ostensibly looking for a news app, his eyes lingering for a split second too long on her call log. He commented on her new glow, his tone laced with a sarcasm so subtle she could almost convince herself she was imagining it. "That charity work at the museum seems to agree with you, Eleonora," he remarked one evening over their silent dinner. The crystal glasses gleamed under the chandelier, each a perfect, cold star. "You've never been so animated." "It's fulfilling to nurture new talent," she replied, forcing a placid smile. Her hands were clenched into fists in her lap. "This new talent," he continued, carefully cutting into his steak. "This Vance fellow. The critics are quite taken with him. They say he appeared out of nowhere. It takes a powerful patron to make a star overnight." He paused, his gray eyes meeting hers across the polished expanse of the dining table. "You must be very proud of your discovery." The implication was clear, hanging in the air between them like the blade of a guillotine. He knew. He might not have the details, but he knew the pristine order of his world had been disturbed. Eleonora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. She was trapped between her husband's cold, calculating suspicion, and her lover's hot-headed recklessness. The breaking point came during the week of Leo's solo exhibition. It should have been a moment of triumph for them both. It was the culmination of her secret efforts, the validation of his talent. But it felt like a countdown to disaster. 2 nights before the opening, Leo called her in a state of agitation. "I need you to come to the studio. It's important." "I can't, Leo. Marcus is home. We have a dinner party tomorrow night. I can't risk it." "Damn Marcus!" he exploded, his voice raw with frustration. "Damn your dinner parties. This is about us, about my life, the life you helped build. You owe me this, Eleonora. Get here." The words "you owe me" struck her like a physical blow. The romance shattered, and in its place was the ugly reality of their arrangement. She was his benefactor, his keeper. The passion had become an obligation. Against her better judgment, terrified of what he might do if she refused, she concocted a lie about a sick friend and drove herself to his studio. The city lights smeared across her windshield, looking less like dreams and more like warnings. She found him pacing the studio floor, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and his fury. "What is it, Leo? What's so urgent?" she asked, her own nerves frayed. He stopped and faced her, his green eyes, once so full of life, now dark with resentment. "I want you at the opening," he said, his voice low and demanding. "Not hiding in the shadows. I want you on my arm, as my partner." Eleonora stared at him, incredulous. "That is impossible, and you know it. It would be social and financial suicide for both of us. Marcus would destroy you. He would destroy me." "Or," Leo countered, taking a step closer, his breath hot with whiskey, "it would be the end of him. You leave him. You file for divorce. With the scandal of an affair, his precious reputation would be in tatters. You'd get a settlement big enough for us to live on for the rest of our lives. We could finally be free." It was the same fantasy he'd proposed before, but this time it wasn't a romantic whisper. It was a strategy, a hostile takeover of her life. She saw him then for what he had become. A young man who had tasted wealth and power and now believed it was his for the taking. The untamed artist was gone, replaced by a greedy, ambitious stranger. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "That is not our reality. This was a beautiful escape, Leo, but that's all it can ever be." A sneer twisted his handsome face. "An escape? A plaything for the bored little rich wife? Is that all I am to you? After everything? After I gave you the one thing your husband and all his money couldn't? Do you have any idea what people would say if they knew Eleanor Sterling, the ice queen of high society, was slumming it with an artist from the wrong side of the tracks?" The threat was no longer veiled. It was a weapon, and he was aiming it right at her heart. Her love for him curdled into a cold, terrifying fear. He was not her savior. He was her ruin. He was a loose thread that could unravel the entire tapestry of her life. He was a liability she could no longer afford. "Don't you dare threaten me," she said, her voice dropping to a glacial whisper that she had learned from Marcus. "It's not a threat," he said, taking another step, backing her towards the door. "It's a choice. Your choice. You can either walk out of that gilded cage and into a real life with me, or you can stay in it. But if you stay, don't think I'm going to just disappear quietly. You made me Eleonora. You can't unmake me." She left the studio, her body trembling with a toxic mix of rage and terror. Driving home through the glittering, indifferent city, she realized the truth. Her affair hadn't been a door out of her cage. It had just been an invitation to a more volatile, more dangerous animal to join her inside it. And now, she was locked in with a predator she had foolishly mistaken for a songbird. As she pulled through the silent, imposing gates of the Sterling mansion, a new, chilling resolve began to crystallize in her mind. Leo was right about one thing. She had made him, and if she had to, she would be the one to unmake him. The price of her silence, she now understood, would be his. The night of the gallery opening was a masterpiece of social performance. Eleonora moved through the glittering crowd with a serene grace that betrayed none of the frantic terror coiling in her gut. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, a stark, elegant sheath that made her look like a column of beautiful, untouchable ice. Marcus was at her side, a proprietary hand on her back, his presence both a comfort and a threat. He was her warden, but tonight he was also her shield. She saw Leo across the crowded white room. He was holding court, surrounded by critics and buyers, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked impossibly handsome in a tailored black suit she knew her money had paid for. When his eyes met hers, he gave her a slow, deliberate smile. It wasn't the smile of a lover. It was the smirk of a victor, a blackmailer. "Your move," it said. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained one of polite, detached interest. She had a plan. It had come to her in the cold, sleepless hours of the night, a plan born of pure, distilled desperation. It was audacious, terrifying, and final. Later in the evening, feigning a headache, she slipped away from the main crowd into a quieter corridor. As she anticipated, it only took a few minutes for Leo to follow. He cornered her near a secluded exit. "So," he began, his voice a low, triumphant purr. "Ready to talk about our future?" Eleonora turned to face him, forcing a look of weary resignation. "You win, Leo," she whispered, allowing a tremor into her voice. "I can't live like this. The fear, the lying. You're right. I can't go back to that." A look of genuine surprise, followed by smug satisfaction, crossed his face. "I knew you'd see it my way. Let's go away," she said, her words quick and breathy, as if she were afraid to say them aloud. "Just for a few days. To talk. To plan everything. I can't think here." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and pleading. "I know a place. It's a family property, down on the coast. It's completely private. No one ever goes there. We can be ourselves. We can decide what to do next." It was the perfect bait, an irresistible blend of romantic escape and strategic planning. His ego, already inflated by the night's success, did the rest. The thought of having her, pliant and defeated, in a secret love nest was a prize he couldn't resist. "When?" he asked, his voice eager. "The day after tomorrow. I'll tell Marcus I'm visiting a spa in the countryside for a few days to recover from the stress of organizing this event. It's believable. I'll drive. Meet me at the old gas station on the coastal highway, mile marker 92, at noon. Leave your car there. We'll go in mine." She was laying the trap, piece by piece, and he was walking right into it. He agreed without hesitation, sealing his fate with a kiss she did not return. 2 days later, Eleonora drove down the coastal highway. The sky was a heavy, oppressive gray, threatening rain. She felt eerily calm, her mind sharp and clear, every nerve humming with a cold, electric purpose. She had packed a small bag. She had also placed a heavy-duty tarpaulin and a coil of thick rope in the trunk of her powerful sedan. She found Leo waiting for her at the appointed spot, leaning against his sports car with an air of casual arrogance. He tossed his bag into her back seat and slid into the passenger side, grinning. "Ready for our escape, my love? It will be a relief to get away," she said, her voice even. The property was as remote as she'd described. It was an old hunting lodge that had been in Marcus's family for generations, nestled deep within a sprawling nature preserve of cypress swamp and brackish marshland. The final miles were on a private, unpaved road, the tires of the car crunching on gravel and mud. Spanish moss hung from the ancient trees like gray, skeletal fingers, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The lodge itself was dark and imposing, built of heavy timber. Inside, it was musty and cold. A wide stone fireplace dominated the main room, and a collection of taxidermied animals stared down from the walls with glassy, dead eyes. But Eleonora didn't lead him inside. "Come," she said, her voice soft. "I want to show you my favorite spot. It's why I love this place." She led him down a narrow wooden boardwalk that snaked out over the murky, black water of the bayou. The water was still, its surface reflecting the gloomy sky like a sheet of polished obsidian. The air was unnervingly quiet, broken only by the buzz of insects and the distant, guttural call of a bullfrog. "It's so quiet here," Leo said, a slight unease creeping into his voice. "Almost creepy." "It's peaceful," Eleonora corrected. "A place where secrets can be kept." They reached the end of the boardwalk, a small square platform with a simple wooden bench. They stood there for a moment in silence, looking out over the water. This was the place. She had heard the stories as a child, whispered by the local caretakers. The waters here were deep, the currents treacherous, and the swamp's oldest residents were always hungry. "So," Leo said, turning to her, his confident smirk returning, "about our plan. I've been thinking, we should aim for at least half of his estate. My lawyer says, there is no our plan, Leo," Eleonora said, her voice suddenly devoid of all warmth. He blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that you made a fatal miscalculation," she said, her gaze as cold and flat as the water below them. "You saw me as a ticket, a prize. You mistook my desperation for weakness. You thought you could threaten me, a sterling, and walk away with half my life." The arrogance on his face finally faltered, replaced by a dawning comprehension and fear. "Eleonora, what are you doing?" "I am ending a problem," she said simply. "You were my beautiful escape, Leo, my art, but you became a flaw in the canvas, a mistake, and I always erase my mistakes." Before he could react, she moved with a speed and ferocity that surprised them both. She shoved him hard, in the center of his chest. He was taller, stronger, but he was caught completely off guard. He stumbled backward, his arms flailing for balance on the slick, mossy wood. For a horrifying second, his fingers brushed against her arm, but she recoiled as if from a snake. His eyes, wide with shock and betrayal, locked with hers for the last time. He hit the black water with a loud, shocking splash that broke the primeval silence. For a moment, he thrashed, sputtering, calling her name, his voice a choked, panicked plea. But the silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. The surface of the water rippled, then stilled. There was no other sound, no other movement. Just the placid, waiting water. Eleonora stood on the platform for a long time, her chest heaving, not from exertion, but from the sheer, adrenaline-fueled release of pressure. She did not cry. She did not scream. She felt nothing but a vast, chilling emptiness. The problem was gone. She walked back to the car, her steps measured and steady. She took his bag and his phone from her car and threw them into the water after him. She drove back to the highway, leaving the remote lodge to its silence and its secrets. She abandoned his car at a bus station in a town 100 miles away, wiping it clean of her fingerprints. Then she drove to the spa she had told Marcus she was visiting, checked in, and had a massage. When she returned to the city, she was the perfect image of a relaxed, serene wife. Weeks later, when a missing persons report was finally filed for the brilliant young artist Leo Vance, who had vanished into thin air at the height of his fame, she feigned a polite, distant sadness. "Such a tragedy," she would say at cocktail parties. He had so much potential. Marcus never questioned her. He merely watched her with those calculating gray eyes, an unreadable expression on his face. Perhaps he suspected, perhaps he knew, or perhaps he simply appreciated that the flaw in his perfect world had been corrected, and order had been restored. Eleonora Sterling was safe, back in her gilded cage. But something had changed. She was no longer just its prisoner. She had become its keeper. She had learned the ultimate lesson of her world, that some things and some people are disposable. And as she stood on her balcony, looking out at the city that was hers to command, she felt no guilt, no remorse. She only felt the cold, hard weight of the silence she had bought, and the chilling knowledge that she was capable of paying any price to keep it.